immediate physical health concerns of COVID-19, are you personally, or should we as a nation be coming to terms with what are going to be the requirements psychologically as far as the impact, the long-term impact of COVID-19 in a country like Trinidad and Tobago?
Absolutely. There's nothing that happens that does not affect us mentally. Everything affects us in some way psychologically. And the reality is that different people will be affected differently based on, let's say, experience with past traumatic or stressful events, personality traits like neuroticism, how resilient we are, what kind of support we have, what kinds of things we have to worry about in terms of having dependence to take care of, and how we perceive how well we can take care of people and ourselves in times like these. These are the things that kind of raise the marker for trauma and extreme anxiety. And then what happens when the higher the anxiety and the fear is, the more we think from our emotional brain, from our limbic system, and not so much from our more rational prefrontal cortex part of our brain. And that's when you see all sorts of behaviors like the rushing out to buy the toilet paper, the looking to see, well, what are others doing? Therefore, that's what I need to do. That sort of panicky kind of behavior, instead of us taking a step back and thinking, okay, breathe, let's try to calm the nervous system and then think clearly about what needs to happen next.
And there's the other side of it where, despite all of the advisories, people continue moving about, continue socializing, bars trying to pull a fast one by keeping open, surreptitiously. People go to the beach and have to be warned about it and so on. Is there an unwillingness, not just by us, because we see it happen globally as well, because of a spring break period in the United States. You saw thousands of young people on the beaches. They had to be chased away from the beaches in Australia for similar reasons. So countries that are so-called first world with a presumably more mature, intelligent society, we're seeing the same things happening. Is there an unwillingness to accept reality, some sort of escapism kind of thing here?
That could be, because you see, again, when we go into a high anxiety state, what happens is that defense mechanisms kick in. So you have denial, you have avoidance, and all these things. And defense mechanisms happen in an attempt to calm the body, calm the system, make you feel safe, because your brain wants to feel safe. You don't want to feel unsafe. So people do these things, but then there's also the aspect of some people just really not getting it for different reasons. People may not get it for, maybe because they may have some sort of intellectual or mental health problem, or because they see other people living as usual, and what we want is for things not to change so drastically. So our brains trick us into thinking, hey, it's not that bad. Not us. It won't affect us. Oh, it's not here yet. It's, on all these messages that we give ourselves so that normalness could remain. And again, that is a defense mechanism. So what has to happen is at some point, we have to stop and say, okay, where's the line between reality and me trying to comfort myself on some unrealistic, in some unrealistic manner, and snap into action?
So and because it's such a broad topic, let's bring it back to the home situation. You have a situation at home where you're being told more and more to stay indoors. The children are at home because school was closed almost a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be that way at least until April 20th, probably a bit longer. So the children under your foot, they're running about the place and so on. Who knows? Maybe somebody in the house is sick. Someone has whether it's actually COVID-19, they haven't been tested it yet, but there's a heightened level of anxiety. You now want to practice social distancing. But people say, what happened to you? You're going to hug up your father, or you're going to hug up your mother. What happened? Suddenly you feel that you want to practice this social distancing and so on. How do you introduce that type of behavior, which we are advised is the responsible type of behavior, in an environment where people are not accustomed to that?
Well, great. Let's look at this as a nice way to learn how to implement boundaries. Boundaries are important. We have to teach kids boundaries, and we ourselves have to set up boundaries. They keep us safe. It's important socially. So I think we have to be a bit matter of fact about this, because our lives hang in the balance. We see what's happening around the world. We just have to stop denying that this is happening. And I remember some time ago we spoke about children. There's something similar with kids and the uncle saying, but why they can't come and hug me?
Yes, we were talking about boundaries in a different sense as well.
We have to protect ourselves, and we have to protect boldly our children as well. No social distancing. They gave us the word. You understand? They gave us the word.
That's going to be the word for the year.
Exactly.
Social distancing.
Exactly. It's what's necessary.
So how do you practice? It sounds like the obvious thing to say, that you explain it, especially to the children and so on. If somebody in the house is sick, that don't go by your grandfather because the older people are more vulnerable. Like to be, or don't go lineman in the mall because yes, there's no school, but you should be at home doing work. Check the work on the internet that your teacher would have given you and so on. How do you introduce that sort of discussion in a way that people don't feel is punishment?
Right. So I think for sure, definitely, children need to completely understand what is happening in terms of this is an illness, it's a virus, this is how the virus is spread, and through social contact and so on, the details. And that it's quite dangerous, and that there are some people who are at higher risk of getting very severe symptoms than others. And for this reason, we want to make sure that we don't give them anything that we don't know that we have. I mean, just really break it down to kids and let them feel that sense of empowerment and responsibility, because it comes back to you being responsible for self and nation.
There will be some who will say that children, depending on the age, of course, will be too young, one, to fully appreciate what you're explaining to them, and two, you will be frightening them. And they will suddenly become, very paranoid and terrified by the possibility, oh, going to die, or mommy going to die, and all that sort of thing. That how do you get that message across?
Yes, so children will have their own anxieties and their own fears, and we do have to, first of all, they may or may not come and tell you that they have these thoughts and these fears and these anxieties. So as long as you know that they're exposed, because, okay, so you mentioned the age of the child.
Yes.
There's a range of
the whole
ages.
Thing of age appropriate.
But especially if they're exposed to social media in some way, or friends, cousins, etc., they're hearing conversations. Mommy and daddy watching the news and the press conferences every day. They're going to hear things and they're going to wonder, and it's going to, what you don't want is them coming up with their own ideas of what is happening and having all this fear building, and they're not sure what it is. So open the conversation up with them and ask them, do you know what it is? Do you know, how do you feel about it, and so on. Involve them in plans. Still make things fun and exciting. Let them. Children need reassurance. Children are very resilient, and they look to us for that reassurance and comfort. And as much as, especially the younger kids, as much as mommy and daddy are feeling safe and calm, they would feel safe and calm. So on that point,
yes.
Parents do have to be aware of your anxieties and the way that you manage stress and the way that you manage yourself and your conversations about this entire situation, because one, you're teaching your kids how to deal with stress, right? And two, we don't want to traumatize them, as you rightfully said.
As a clinical and organizational psychologist, are we prepared for this? Are we as a society prepared in a general sense? Because there will always be exceptions. There will always be different, it's a scale. There will always be those who are very capable, those who are completely incapable, and somewhere different grades along the way.
Yes.
But at a general level, are we ready for this?
Who is ready for something like this? This is
when I say ready, I mean that we're able to cope sufficiently well. I mean, nothing is perfect and so on. Like we don't go running and about to buy 10 more cases of toilet paper when you have 15 cases already piled up. That you don't go and buy more than you need to. We even had, and again, it's important to point out that this is not just us, because we had the health minister in the UK, the head of their NHS, saying, please don't go and buy everything off the shelves, because one, you have enough, and two, you're depriving those who just coming off shift late in the night, maybe at a hospital, when they go to the supermarket, there's nothing. So there seems to be some sort of panic within us that forces us to do things that we don't need to do.
Yes, and that is exactly what it is, the panic, the now functioning from the emotional brain, which is not necessarily always very rational. Well, it's not usually rational. It functions, differently from your rational part of your brain. And so, I just touched my face. And so...
No, we have about 22 more times because we're told that we touch it 23 times in an hour.
Oh, Lord. So we have to, there will be an adjustment phase. There will be an adjustment period. But no, and that's the thing about trauma, and that's the thing about high stress, and that's the thing about shocking things like these. We sitting going about our lives hunky-dory, we getting up, we go into work, we have regular everyday stresses that we have already adjusted to, expected, that may and may not come, and so on. And then here comes this stressor that trumps all stressors, and we kind of have to figure it out. So the more information we get from credible sources, and the more we feel like we're knowing what's happening around us, is the safer that we would feel. And safety helps to calm that anxiety. Now, the other aspect of it is social observation. You ever notice, and this is a study that we see on, we see a lot on, all over.
Yeah.
You go into an elevator and everybody faces the door. Do we know why we face the door? We face the door because everybody facing the door. If you go to a bus stop, let's say in England, and everybody stands shoulder lengths apart, you're not going to come and stand right here to somebody. So when we see others go into a panic, for whatever reason, Fazir jumps up and runs out of here. I want to know what, I want to run. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on. I'm thinking there's something happening, and maybe I should fight, or freeze.
I'm a freezer. I can tell you that, because there was a time when we had an earthquake right here on set with Joel Villafana, and both of us stood there watching one another and didn't know what to do. So I'm a freezer in that sense.
Right. So all of that is coming from, again, the emotional part of your brain. So it sort of shuts down your ability to say, okay, what do I do to rationalize, make good decisions? And so we start now to find ways to escape, either by dissociating and freezing, running, fighting. Somebody has to come tell us what to do. And so now, at this stage, what we really need is information. We need to feel safe. We need to know that our basic needs for safety, food, shelter, these things will be met. Otherwise, we remain in a panic state.
But do we have unrealistic expectations? And I'm not talking about government saying this, they're going to give that or the other, but I'm talking about, and I don't know if it has to do with us as a society compared to some of our Caribbean neighbors who've been struck by hurricane disasters. Other parts of the world have had earthquakes and so on. We had our July 1990 coup attempt, and we had the 1970 revolution and so on. But is it that because we've led generally fairly comfortable lives without the stress of some serious disruption, that even what might be considered minor, relatively minor compared to what is going on in the rest of the world, causes the panic level to rise beyond what it really should be?
I think...
Do we have to be conditioned to dealing with stress, in other words? That's what I'm asking.
Generally speaking, yes. So I think Trinidadians, as much as, yes, we may have a comfort level, we do generally experience stresses that, in our individual lives. We're not people who we'd say have gold spoons in our mouths and don't experience any type of stress.
I hear you on that, but maybe I'm framing the question the wrong way. But this type of stress is different.
Exactly.
This type of stress is like what you see on TV, what you see in a movie, what you would have seen on different programs, and what people are saying that was shown on some movies. This is where something that you can't even see is going to kill you. And you're hearing all the horror stories in other parts of the world. 700 died yesterday in Italy, or 600 died the day before. These are unthinkable sort of numbers. So coping with that and wondering or being fearful that something similar to that or maybe even a minor version of that could affect us, does that create a heightened level of fear?
It certainly does. And not just for us, for everybody around the world, it certainly does. And because of that, that's why you see the defenses and the panicking and the panic buying, the amount, because we saw it, we're seeing it happening before our eyes. We saw the panic buying and the rushing and so on. And even in people still going out and not observing protocols, the denial and so on, we're seeing that happening. So we know it. We know that it's affecting us in that way.
So we'll take a pause and we'll continue. We'll get some prescriptions from Kelly McFarland, clinical and organizational psychologist, to give us some guidance as to how to organize ourselves effectively, productively, even in the home environment. If it is that we had to move towards a complete shutdown, we don't know, it might very well happen. Given what is happening globally, we have to wait and see. But in the few minutes that we have available with our guests heading towards the top of the hour, we'll get her perspectives on that right after this break.
Friends, in my research, I found what life is worth. It's peace and happiness, no more prejudice.
View Optical is giving back to all its loyal customers 30% off all designer frames, 30% off all progressive and bifocal transition lenses. Get a free pair of designer polarized sunglasses with these purchases. Seaview Optical, affordable eye care for everyone.
Sun and rain problem? Call Awning and Roofing Specialist. We specialize in awnings, umbrellas, roofing, and retractable awnings. We also offer car rental services. Call us today, Awning and Roofing Specialist at 704-8024 and for our Tobago office 319-3040. Find us on Facebook, Awning and Roofing Specialist, installation nationwide.
To get ahead, you need more than just practice. You need the Express Tuition Course, a comprehensive coaching tool that gives SEA students the competitive edge in all subject areas. With the Express Tuition Course, you get a practice test based on the current SEA curriculum, a complete marking scheme, and step-by-step solutions allowing you to precisely gauge your progress. Creative writing tips to enhance your work, plus a tuition and revision section to help you stay sharp. So don't just practice, get ahead with the Express Tuition Course, free every Tuesday in the Trinidad Express newspapers.
At Green Dot, we're making it easier for you with the all-new G-Dot customer portal. Get 24/7 access to your account from all your smart devices. View your account status, see your active services and hardware, view your balance, pay your bills, set up recurring payments, and more. Simply visit gd.tt today and register with your account number and email address to access this service. The all-new G-Dot customer portal. It's just one of the ways Green Dot is making it easier for you. Green Dot, improving and simplifying lives.
I saw you kiss Bill. Nobody can see this video. When Rich finds out Brooke has been kissing Bill, his head is going to explode, clearing the way for you. I am not going to let you blackmail me. As they say, payback is a you.
6:42 coming out towards 6:43 in Trinidad and Tobago, as we just had that look at the Beetham Highway. Someone going right across the Beetham Highway, crossing the line of traffic. Thankfully, it's not heavy traffic, but again, people do some strange things, some irresponsible things, as we're seeing right now with this whole COVID-19 situation. As we return to studio and go up to the top of the hour with our guest Kelly McFarlane, who is a clinical and organizational psychologist. So. Give us some prescriptions, if you may, or some guidelines as to how we should be coping, if there's any sort of step-by-step way that we could start, whether at an individual level, at a family level, with those we interact with, as to how we deal with the challenges associated with this COVID-19 situation.
Let's start at the individual level, and you may have heard this one before, but I can't say it enough. Be very careful about the sources that you take on information from. So many things are being forwarded in all caps with exclamation marks and looking at like it's real news and all of these things from all sorts of people. Sometimes I see tons of forwards a day about the new status of COVID-19, and when I look, there's no logo, there's no source, there's nothing, just somebody picks up a phone and records themselves saying all sorts of things, and people, the mere fact that it's being forwarded, people are taking it on. So find one or two good sources, listen to we have the press conferences so we know what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago, maybe choose one or two other sources like WHO and so on, BBC, to find out your up-to-date news, and don't just listen to everything, because that contributes to a rise in panic and anxiety by the minute. And that's not healthy. It's not healthy to live like that.
Let's just spend a couple of minutes on that, because we could probably spend a whole session on that, on the impact of social media on our psyche. What is your sense of, how do you tell somebody who is addicted to this thing, as soon as they get something forwarded to them, boy, 85 people die in so-and-so health facility.
Yes, exactly.
And the government trying to cover it up. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. This is real.
Yes.
And what is it about us that wants us to believe that?
It's the panic, it's the expectation that this thing might get worse, it could be bad. And I guess in a sense too, it could be some people wanting to be ahead of things so they could protect themselves and their families. But please fact check. Don't spiral things out of control that has no source. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know who did it. Even though sometimes people do Photoshop and put logos on things. But still, fact check, wait, listen, hear, think, right? Don't spread that emotional contagion all over to other people, and then only minutes later or hours later to hear it wasn't true. So you just worked yourself up and your family up and your friends up for all that time, just for it to die back down, and it was nothing. You know, and then that happens again in the next hour.
Right. So step one, if you could call it step one, is reliable sources of information to guide you along.
Be responsible.
Next point.
The next point is stay in contact, even if you're isolating. Stay in contact. A colleague of mine, she's been here before too. I saw she was posting. Yes, we're saying social distancing, but it's more physical distancing, because we could still be socially in contact with others on WhatsApp, social media, and that's one of the good things about today, that with WhatsApp and the way we could call people, video and all of these things, it's easier to stay in contact.
You really don't need to be physically in contact with anybody to get information across.
There you go.
And so on.
Exactly. So do stay in contact with people while sharing good, safe news. Share your concerns, feel your anxiety, feel your fear. It's normal, but don't ruminate. Don't stick on it. Don't ponder on it. Get your facts. Stop, calm down, think, okay, what does this mean? What do I have to do now? How do I process this? What is the advice when this is happening? Stay centered, and so that you don't just continue to spiral sort of emotionally, and right. So don't stick on negative thoughts. Change your thoughts. Think of things more positive. COVID-19 is everywhere. Every time you look at your phone, something about COVID-19. Let's maybe talk about something else sometimes with your family members instead of COVID
But how
all
difficult
day.
is that? I waited for Liverpool to win the league title.
There you go.
Now they get called
Well,
off after 30 years.
Everything called off.
Well, it's been postponed.
Everything
and
called off.
all the football on TV is replays.
Yeah.
All the cricket on TV is replays. So what do I do?
Well,
Play Scrabble or Monopoly?
Yes, especially because you made the point earlier about children and not wanting to increase too much fear in them and so on. If they're hearing you scared about COVID-19 all day, and if they are at a position where they may feel vulnerable in terms of being able to take care of themselves, and that is something that's a factor that contributes to higher stress and anxiety when you don't perceive yourself being able to take care of yourself. If I can't take care of myself and mommy and daddy can't take care of me because they're so afraid, well, my anxiety shoots through the roof. So perhaps distract them from COVID sometimes. So you for yourself have to be capable of distracting from COVID. I'm not saying don't pay attention to the situation, but you're isolated, you're following all the steps, you're listening to all the news briefs so you know what's happening in the country. For a moment, look at some pictures. Remember when we did this, or what do you think about? There are so many things to talk about, to look at, games to play, things to do. Who is your best friend in school? What you all talk about? Just find other things to distract yourself a bit. Don't ruminate on the negatives. It's not going to help just focusing on negatives.
And especially for adults, and it's important, as you mentioned, to just provide a safe space for children, especially with all those things. But as an adult, I mean, we have the evidence of it, where the government said one thing yesterday, people rushed to the NIB offices hoping to get the money, and as usual, nothing is in place and so on as yet. But the thing is that people might be thinking, what about my job? If the country shuts down, and I am laid off because the businesses that a person that I'm working for, if their business have to shut down and they can't sustain me, I don't have no income, I have debts to pay. Yes, the banks might give me a 3-month bly or a 6-month bly, but I still have to pay it.
Yeah.
So what about coping with that and not just trying to deal maturely and responsibly with the COVID-19 information and keeping the children safe, but looking down the track and seeing debts, no income, how are we going to cope, how are we going to pay the rent, is there any alternative, do we have to go and live by somebody else, all those sorts of things.
So you see just what you're doing there, that's good, and that's teaching kids strategy as well. So one thing with now is we're hopeful that we know that it can get bad, and we're hopeful that it won't get really bad, right? However, what they say, hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right? So start planning. So one thing that I do in therapy sometimes when somebody is very scared about something, I ask one question: what's the worst that could happen? Let's start from there. So the worst thing that could happen is this. Okay, let's say that happened. How will we cope with it? What do we have in place? Have we ever experienced anything that's similar to this? What helped us get through? Do we know somebody who experienced something similar to this? So you're now teaching your kids, or even forgetting about teaching the kids, but for yourself, start planning just in case, in terms of the tangibles of what would be available and who could help yourself. That's case by case. That's not everybody has, and because not everybody has access to the same resources or the same social supports, for some people it will be a lot more difficult than others. But get into the planning. So again, when we stay in that emotional state where we're just worried and anxious and scared, we stay there, and that doesn't help us start to plan. So we have to calm the nervous system. We have to self-soothe, and I'll say right here, don't self-soothe with alcohol and drugs.
Which is a whole different discussion.
Exactly. And then start thinking, okay, what next?
But what then do you say? And I know quite a few people who do that. I mean, there are some of us who's a pessimist. So I think worst case scenario. I think if Monday morning your income drops to zero, how do you cope from that point onwards? What do you do? What can you arrange? What adjustments do you have to make if your income drops to zero?
Yeah.
Others will say, but with all of that, man, the thing will be so bad. We'll ride it out and thing. There's people exaggerating and stressing people out. how do you get people to, not necessarily to think down to zero, but get people to try and take a dose of reality that will help you prepare, help you and those around you, if you see yourself as a responsible individual, to prepare for what may come. If it doesn't come, say thank God. If it doesn't come, but you were prepared for it. So you have your bomb shelter just in case.
Exactly.
So how do you get people to come around to the realization, prepare your bomb shelter. You may never have to use it, but prepare it anyway.
So both those things you said are very good. So one, yes, so you get scared and it's fine, and again, this fear and the anxiety is necessary. Fear and anxiety tells us that, hey, something needs to change, there's something going wrong, right? So you get scared, you settle down, you do your planning, and then you go to that optimistic, let's calm down. This wouldn't necessarily happen. And you see, it's easier to do that, it's easier to think positively after you've planned, after you know that I might have some cushion to land on, right? If you don't, or you hadn't thought about that, or you haven't planned for that, it's a lot more difficult to be positive and optimistic, especially when you see your kids have to eat, you might have an ailing family member that you have to find a way to take care of and buy medication for, so people's situations really differ. But the real strategy, the best thing to do is to stop, plan, and then get back to trying to be more optimistic.
We have a couple of minutes left, Ms. McFarlane, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning to offer us some prescriptions. If you were to sum up your perspective on this, given that this is unprecedented, we've never had a challenge like this, either as a nation or a region or the world, given the way it's impacted on so many. We have 35 trainees stuck in Barbados, and that has its own discussion. We have people who just came off the boat from Guadeloupe, that has its own discussion. So there are multiple things happening in relation to this. In the couple of minutes that we have, what is your final recommendation to our audience?
I think that it's all happening so quickly, in a sense, right? It's hitting us hard, it's hitting us quickly. And I think it could feel like a dream that we're not waking up from. A
nightmare.
A nightmare, precisely, a nightmare that we're not waking up from. So my advice would be, yes, you're not alone in thinking and feeling this way. The anxiety, the fear, it's shared among most of us. How we deal with the anxiety and fear is different person to person, and so you might see anxiety and fear in one person look like we drinking and we liming, they masking, they covering, and you might see somebody else crumbling, and you might see somebody in between. So it is normal, I think, but the important thing here is that for us to get through this, we really have to be responsible for self and others. So in terms of that, sharing, as I spoke about, sharing fake news and being responsible in terms of social distancing and all of these things, we have to take responsibility on ourselves so that we can have other people see and follow suit in a better manner. We have no guarantees, but the best way to get through this is really to follow what the experts are asking us to follow.
Indeed, and credible sources, and as you said, your colleague talked about the fact that it's not really social distancing, but physical distancing. You can still keep in contact. The beauty of social media, as you said correctly, is that we could still interact. But interact with people who will give you proper information, proper guidance, reassure you, be that shoulder to lean on, even if it's over social media, to offer you that reassurance that don't worry, I'm here to support you, and that kind of thing. So thanks very much for being with us this morning, because as we realize more and more, as we become impacted by this, it's not just about the physical issues, health-wise and so on, but it's the emotional, it's the psychological, of course it's the health thing we know, it's the financial. There are so many. This is impacting us to a level where, as I said before, the ripples are going to extend way beyond 2020, and we need, as a nation, to prepare ourselves in a real responsible way in coping with this. We go to the top of the hour for the news, and then we'll continue our discussion after that.
PRW, protect your home.